when you're going through a period of uncertainty, as pretty much everyone does, it can be hard to not focus entirely on the thing that you're waiting on, or hyper obsess about whatever it is that is uncertain in that moment or that period of time, because it's a natural response, because the brain wants resolution, it wants certainty, because the unknown and the uncertain is a dangerous place. The brain wants to protect itself. So when something is uncertain, when you don't know where you stand, or you're waiting for to hear back about a job or school admissions or something like that, you can end up in a situation where you hyper focus on what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, when you're going to know, because your brain just really wants some kind of certainty and some kind of confirmation or validation that you're going to be okay, or that you're going to get the thing that you want. And if you don't have enough things to fill your time, then it can get worse and worse, because your brain will hyper focus and obsess and create problems that don't exist. And that's a very, I wouldn't say it's a very dangerous place to be, but it's a very stressful place to be. And the crazy thing is that it's all happening in your head. So if it's a situation where you're waiting on a job, or waiting on a next round of interviews, or whatever it is, you tend to replay the interview process, how you did, whether or not you did okay, you answered everything properly, or whatever it is, because your brain just wants to know as soon as something happens, did I make it? Did I not make it? And the wild thing is that finding out immediately if you didn't get something is actually easier for the brain to handle, because then you can move forward. It's like, okay, I did this, I didn't get the result I wanted. At least now I know, and I can move forward. Doesn't mean that you don't feel bad or feel regret or remorse, but that's actually more comfortable, I think, for most people than sitting waiting for an answer. And it's important in those situations to force yourself out of that pattern of thinking, because if you don't, then you'll end up going down that path for an indefinite amount of time, and it'll feel like torture. And it might only be a couple days, or it might be a week or so, but the thing is that if you don't control your focus in those moments, then all that worry will expand to take up all of your time and mental space. So if you are in those situations, as hard as it might be, because sometimes you're waiting on things that are very important, right? Like if you're waiting for a job and you don't have a job, there's financial pressure, there's financial strain, there's just overall stress. And if you're in that situation, what ends up happening if you worry too much is that you suffer way more stress than actually exists. There's not that much stress, right? Like you apply for a job and you interview and you're waiting. Nothing really changes day to day, unless your situation is very dire, which is different. But for the most part, day to day, nothing really changes. Hour to hour, nothing changes. You prep for the interview, you did the interview, and now you're waiting to hear back. The time before and after, I imagine most things are pretty much the same. But if you don't put your mind and your focus elsewhere while you're waiting, then you'll just create problems that didn't exist. You'll create stressors that didn't exist. You'll look for reasons to understand if you did well or if you did bad. Your mind kind of focuses on something. You might convince yourself that you did really bad in the interview, or that you didn't do a good job, or whatever it is. And all you're doing is creating more stress for yourself. I think there's a Seneca quote where he says, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And the thing that's crazy about it is you're in charge of your imagination. And if you don't change what you're doing, and if you don't change your focus, then you'll continue to suffer for much longer than you need to. There's only one of two outcomes in most situations. Either you get the thing that you wanted or you didn't. But all the time in between you finding out can be spent doing something productive and working on other things that will help you grow as a person or improve your life. Or you can sit there and just stress and kind of lose yourself in the stress, which doesn't end up working out well ever. So if you're in a situation like that, the important thing to do is to try to compartmentalize it and put it out of your head. Once it's done, it's done. If you did everything you could and you worked hard and you prepped, or you did the work and you're waiting to hear back for an assignment, whatever it is, if you worked as hard as you could and you did the things you were supposed to do and you gave it an honest, sincere effort, then there's nothing else that can be done at this point. Now there's a waiting game. And the way to survive a waiting game is to look at your life from a 360 perspective, because this one thing isn't your whole life. So what you would need to do, what I think is best to do, is to compartmentalize it, put it in one side, and then look at, well, what else is there day to day that I need to do? What are the other important things in my life? And if you really can't think of anything, I'd say one of the biggest things that is always there is your health, right? Now, if you find yourself a lot of time and you're waiting to hear back from something, you can always default to, what can I do to take care of my health right now, right? What can I do to ensure that I'm in a position to do really well if I do get this job, or if I do well on this assignment, or whatever it is. And one of the foundational ways to do that is to make sure that you're taking care of your health, and taking care of your responsibilities and taking care of the things that you need to do. Because if you obsess too much in the waiting and the uncertainty, then what ends up happening is you lose all that time, and you might ignore responsibilities because you say, oh, I'm so stressed out, I can't do anything. Oh, I feel like this, and I really just need to know how things are going to turn out. And if you let that balloon up way too big, you can end up not taking care of the things in your life you're supposed to take care of. You can shed your responsibilities, and then now what's happening is you have this uncertainty that you're waiting on, and now you're adding more and more stressors because you're ignoring your health, or you're sleeping late, or you're indulging in substance abuse, or you're just playing video games all day, when in reality all that time could be spent working on things that improve your life, because this one thing isn't your entire life. So I like to default to my health. I always think, what can I do today health-wise that I'll thank myself for tomorrow? And it's tough to break out of that and focus on what you need to take care of. But when you do take that first step, it becomes easier. And as weird as it is, a lot of times I felt like I couldn't focus on anything else. I was like, I can't even, I'm going to be distracted if I do anything else. I just really need to know what's going on. But if you force yourself to do the other thing, whatever the other thing is, or any number of things, you can actually end up in a situation where you totally forget about the worry. And it might be brief and it might be temporary, but if you really force yourself to look elsewhere in your life, to look at other things that you need to do, to focus on other areas, other responsibilities, you do get to a point eventually where you have completely forgotten about the thing you were worried about. And if you do that day to day, or hour to hour, or whatever it is, week to week, you do it long enough, you start to minimize the outcome that you're waiting on. You realize that it's not that big of a deal. Whatever it is that you're waiting on, you realize that you're going to be okay, because you were okay before this opportunity came, and that means you'll be okay after it. You might go through a period of stress, you might go through a period of tension, depending on what it is, but you learn to have confidence in yourself, because you understand that you have a lot more control over your life and over the things that you need to do. And you can't do that if you're constantly worried. And so I think that when you're living in the uncertainty of something, as tough as it is, you have to force yourself out of it. Force yourself out of that worry. And you don't just force yourself out of something. Like, you don't just negate an emotion or put it into a vacuum and it disappears. You have to occupy your mind with something else, right? You don't stop a thought. Your brain is just focused on whatever it is you're thinking about, and you don't just tell it to stop thinking. I think there are some people who could do that with meditation and with other techniques. They're able to just clear their mind, which takes a lot of practice. But for the most part, as a beginner, what you can do is shift your focus to something else. Just busy yourself with something else. And ideally, whatever it is that you're busying yourself with is something productive. Now, some people will go to video games or watching TV or binge watching series or whatever it is, or spending time with friends, and all those things are fine, and all those things are good ways to distract yourself. But you just want to make sure that they don't become a crutch, that you don't default to playing 5 or 6 hours of video games a day, or watching 5 movies, or spending all your free time with your friends, or going out or something, or what or the other. Because if you end up doing that, then it goes back to the previous point where you're just dodging responsibilities. You're ignoring other things that you could be doing, and then those things are going to stack on top of this uncertainty. And then if you don't get the outcome you wanted, now you have all these other things that you put off that you will be very stressed out about. So now you're stacking all this stress and you're ignoring responsibilities, and that's stacking more and more stress. When in reality, you could just tell yourself, okay, I'm waiting on this answer, I'm waiting on this resolution for something. I'm going to leave that off to the side. I'm not going to worry about it because I've done my part. What can I do? What else can I do in my life to keep myself busy, to work on the things that I need to work on? What else can I do that I would enjoy that's also still productive? What can I do is there something new that I can do? You know, if you, and I think that's actually a good time to try new things. So if you like to work out, you could think, well, and I'm going to add something new to my workout, or I'm going to go do a different type of workout, like going out for a hike instead of going to the gym one day. Because experiencing new things can also help clear your mind of worry and uncertainty. So if you find yourself in an uncertain situation, or you're in a period of uncertainty, the best thing to do is occupy your mind with something else. Occupy your mind ideally with something productive, with something that will help you grow in some way, something that will help you improve your life in some way, as opposed to sitting there and just waiting for whatever it is that you're waiting on. Because whether or not it gets resolved or you get the outcome that you wanted, you'll be okay. You were okay before you had this thing, before this opportunity came your way. You're going to be okay after it. But if you sit and obsess about the problem or waiting on a resolution, you kind of just end up shooting yourself in the foot. And the time that you could be spending getting better and being productive just ends up going to worry. And worrying is, I think Mark Twain said, worrying is like a rocking chair, sitting in a rocking chair. You move back and forth, but you don't really get anywhere. So if you find yourself in the situation, try to pause and think through, what can I do right now to keep my mind off of it? What can I do to feel better overall? What can I do to improve my situation elsewhere so that this thing doesn't occupy my entire life and occupy my entire mind? And it isn't easy, but it is something that as you start to do it, the more you start to do it, the better you get at it. And you have other things that you could do. You have other things you could do that are fun, that'll help keep your mind off of it. And you have other things you could do that are productive that will get your mind off of it. And the productive things are actually better. You don't have to just be productive 24/7, but you shouldn't just ignore everything, waiting on one answer from someone or waiting on one response from someone or whatever it is. Because if you do that, then you're kind of teaching your brain that anytime uncertainty comes, all you're going to do is focus on that in the waiting period. And I think that can become a habit. And then in the long run, you might actually be unwilling to do things that require uncertainty. And most of life is uncertain. And if you do that long enough, you can kind of recess back into this state of being where you just avoid everything that might put you through the pain of dealing with uncertainty. And that's a pretty dangerous place to be. So when you're dealing with uncertainty, look at other parts of your life. Ask yourself very simple things like, how can I not make this worse? I think that's a good place to start. Before you even ask how can I make things better, you say, well, how can I not make things worse? And number one would be to stop worrying about the outcome. Number two would be to take care of your health. And I think number three would be to occupy your time with something more productive than sitting around worrying. And if you do those things and you build that habit, then the uncertainty becomes easier and easier. And as uncertainty becomes easier, I think life overall becomes a little bit better, because you're never going to be in a situation where everything is certain. So you need to learn to accept it. Don't fight the void. And if you're able to do that over a long enough time period or enough times, then you can get to a point where your life is actually you're not averse to uncertainty. And the less averse you become to uncertainty, the easier it is to take on new things, the easier it is to deal with periods of uncertainty in the future, because you know that when uncertainty does come, you have all these other things to fall back on. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. It's kind of the golden rule of life. Like the more you put in, the more you get out. So the better you become at dealing with uncertainty, with small things or just with anything in the present, the more skilled you'll be and experienced you'll be at dealing with it in the future. So if you're going through a period of uncertainty, remember that you were okay before it started, which means you could be okay after, regardless of the outcome. And there's no reason to beat yourself up and put yourself in a situation where you're constantly worrying about what's going to happen. And the time that you have is a gift. So one of the worst things you could do with it is sit around and just worry about things. You should instead focus on how to be productive, how to keep yourself busy, and keep yourself busy in a way where you continue to improve your life and make things better. So I think that's pretty much it. If you're dealing with uncertainty, it does suck, but train yourself to be productive through the uncertain times so that you become better at managing yourself through it and you don't become afraid of just dealing with anything uncertain in the future.